Well, hello and welcome to another episode, a very special episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyers podcast. I'm joined as always by the co-host Thomas Vick, and we have a couple of additional special guests. Thomas, do you want to introduce or reintroduce Corey to us?
Yes, Corey Sprunger rejoins us today. We spoke with Corey a few weeks ago about his practice and some of the services that he provides to attorneys. So encourage people to go back in the archives and check out the podcast that we had earlier with Corey. So Corey Sprunger is joining us today. And then also Norris Ham, who is the executive director of Sprunger Global. He is with us, and he's on the video here with us coming from Cairo, Egypt, in the shadows of the pyramids. He said they're about 20 miles away. So glad to have you all with us today, and looking forward to what you all are going to inform us about today.
I think this is a first for the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast, Thomas, where we are now international in scope. So, Norris, thanks for giving us those credentials. Corey, I'm going to start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about the background of what Sprunger Global is, kind of how it got started, and then introduce the audience to Norris?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. I think we're doing some exciting work, and it's a really unique opportunity. So, Sprunger Global got started in about the year before COVID, and the idea was basically my wife and I went on a mission trip over to Kyrgyzstan, and while we were over there, we were building a halfway house, the structure for one of those. And while we were doing it, I just kept thinking to myself, everybody here is relying on my friend who's with us, who's a bricklayer. His skill set is what we're all relying on right now. And I kept thinking the whole time we were there has got to be a way to use the skill set that we have. Went to school for a long time, spent a lot of money on law school, and there's got to be a way to use this skill set. And so that's where Sprunger Global began, was that. And it was the idea, let's take lawyers to go do pro bono, international, overseas, faith-based projects. And then COVID hit. So the whole thing sort of went on pause because we were going to go to Uganda, had this whole project ready, and then nobody's traveling anywhere. So that came to a screeching halt. Once COVID let up, then we were able to re-get the ball going again. And we started again with going back to Kyrgyzstan, and we were taking American lawyers to go work on, it was Ukrainian refugees who they were displaced. What are the legal methods to get to the United States? What is a good way to do this? And from there, it's just sort of evolved as we've gone. From the beginning, the purpose of Sprunger Global is really twofold. This is a faith-based ministry is what it is. And purpose number one, in Galatians, it says the only thing that matters is faith expressing itself as love. So that's the only thing that matters. Faith expressing itself as love. So what we're trying to do is love our neighbor with our skill set that we have. That's goal number one. That's also the most obvious goal. That's the goal that people always think of when they want to go do some kind of a pro bono. But goal number two is just as important, if not more important to me. And that is the volunteer themselves, I believe, experiences a life-changing event. I believe that their heart is open to the Spirit moving in their heart when they are out of their comfort zone. So we've all done pro bono in our own firm in our backyard, right? But how many of us have done pro bono in Kyrgyzstan or Uganda, right? Not very many. And when we do, I just think if it's done correctly, there is a life-changing experience that I care about. So it's also about the volunteer. So with that in mind, it was really only growing with my extra attention. So whenever I had extra space and time, that's all this was growing at. Met Norris, I think it's been about 2 years now, and he is from Michigan. He is a Notre Dame grad from law school, but he's been over in Egypt for, I think, 17 or something like that years. And we met, and we ended up bringing him onto our law firm as an immigration attorney, doing our immigration work from over there. And then just in January this year, we started having a conversation and saying, hey, what if we just do part-time with our law firm and move over and focus more of your work on Sprunger Global? He's been a missionary over there in Egypt. This is his background, uniquely positioned as a lawyer and a missionary, bringing both of those together. And so that's when he came on as our executive director. And now we're moving a little bit faster now that it's not just me in my spare time. And so anyways, that's how he came on, and he's been organizing another trip coming up here in November and getting us ready. So hopefully I did that justice, but that's Norris for you.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much for that background and context. And Norris, tell us a little bit about your background and the desire to work almost as a legal missionary. That's a term I'm not sure I've ever put together back to back like that. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you do any of those Google searches for Lawyers Without Borders, there's a few things out there, but the websites haven't been updated for about 10 years because those people that created them figured out that it was really difficult to have Lawyers Without Borders. Yeah, my wife and I came to Egypt in 2008. We were both school teachers, and I knew I wanted to go to law school, but didn't have any money, and found this beautiful way to go and work in an international private American K through 12 school, make decent money doing it, and then go to law school. Well, I chose not to go to law school after that first year because as a 25-year-old, when I first came abroad, I did think I knew absolutely everything about the world. I was a 25-year-old male with a decent education from the United States. I felt like, yeah, I can control things and I can use all that I've learned and really change the world. And then I realized that the world was absolutely impacting my life in so many ways. And compassion, as Corey said, we cannot help but be transformed by those things that we see and the hardship and the difficulty and the challenges around us. So I took my first savings from being abroad and went to Creighton University, a distance education, did a master's in dispute resolution and negotiation, whetted the appetite for law. And then when our second child was about to be born, my wife and I made the choice that, hey, if we're going to go to law school ever, this is now the time to do it. With a 2-year-old and a baby on the way, we left everything that we absolutely knew in life, including our friends and our church and Egypt, which we loved, and we went to Notre Dame, where we also love Notre Dame. We very much love it. I grew up kind of around that region, but Notre Dame kept telling you, we were going to be a different type of lawyer, and I had no idea what that was because I kept looking around and going, I see the same type of person. And what I really was impacted by the professors and the classes and the courses that I took is that law is incredibly broad and getting broader. And there are ways in which we as lawyers, if we just gave a small percentage of our mental acuity and intelligence and thought about the ways in which the law could impact the lives of people around us beyond just, the region around us, beyond just our clients, but beyond even the national borders that we exist in, we could find some amazing ways to do that. And so came back to Egypt after law school. This is in 2018. And then we're back in the States on just a brief furlough. And I walked into my organization's office, and lo and behold, the Sprunger name was on one half of the desk as I walked into Sprunger, and after I walked into our organization's office in Fort Wayne. And I said, why in the world is my missions organization sharing an office with a law firm? We just sold out. Like, what is this? And so, I'm all hot about it, and I'm going into my, my organization's, chief executive officer's office and going, what's going on? And she starts sharing with me about this is a like-minded firm. And so when I got back to Egypt, I called Corey. Actually, I emailed him, and he called me back, and it was probably 9:30, 10 p.m. at night. And I'm getting a call from Bern, Indiana. And he's just kind of sharing where his heart is. And his heart is absolutely for the lost, both abroad and also right at home, and specifically with those lawyers that he cares about with the legal profession. And I believe everything that he believes, that when lawyers go abroad and take their skills abroad, even for a short-term trip, the amount of transformation that happens in their lives, the growth, the decisions that they make for God and for their faith are tremendous, and they have tremendous echoes and waves of impact in their lives. And it will change the whole trajectory of their career just because they've engaged abroad with marginalized people groups, or abroad in countries that don't have the same freedoms that we do in the United States, or abroad in post-revolutionary societies where we're still trying to figure things out, or looking at water projects and going, well, what is water law in East Africa? Do we have riparian rights I'd love for people to answer that question for Egypt. Does Egypt have riparian rights? Because Ethiopia just built an amazing dam, and now we've got something going on, something brewing. And yet we as lawyers can step in and we can create opportunities for peace and reconciliation. We can create interest-based integrative solutions for these conflicts and these challenges, and also at the same time having that impact on our personal lives. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Well, we have just a slight disconnect in the internet, so we'll get Norris to catch back up there. While that's happening, Corey, tell us, you mentioned a trip coming up in November. Tell us a little bit about that trip and what led to that particular thing and how you decide what might be a good candidate for a Sprunger Global Initiative.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So Norris had mentioned how there are not a lot of other organizations doing what we do. We've heard of Doctors Without Borders, but why not Lawyers Without Borders? Well, the obvious answer is because we're licensed in American law, right? We're not licensed in Egyptian law. So that's where the problem comes in. However, there are a lot of opportunities that are, I would say, more surprising than you would think. When I was in law school, I went to Pepperdine and we went through the Global Justice Institute. We went over to India. And in India, victims of sexual abuse crimes have standing to prosecute the case if the prosecutor is bought off, right? So they can stand in and do their own case. And so we went over there and all we did was teach these pro bono lawyers that were helping these victims how to make a more coherent argument. So we were just doing the IRAC, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, right? Do we need to know Indian law? No, but they're from the British common law system. So just teaching them, hey, look, structure your arguments like this. This is how it makes sense. It flows, it works. And that's all we did, so things like that can work. This particular project, our hope is that we're going to Egypt in November, where Norris is at, and we're hoping to work with a Sudanese refugees who've been displaced into Egypt. And we're not working this time with them to try and do American immigration. Instead, we're talking about work before the UN and their refugees. So we're helping them put together their refugee applications. What does that look like? Drafting their stories and putting together the application. Do I, Corey Sprunger, have any clue about that law? No, I have no idea. But it's enough, right? My legal background is enough that I can write an application telling a story. So there are many, many projects out there. Another really interesting one, going back to Pepperdine again, is they've been working with the Ugandan Supreme Court for a number of years now because they don't have plea deals over there. And so people sit in jail incarcerated for years and years without a trial, some of which are innocent. And so the Supreme Court of Uganda is working with Pepperdine. Every year they send, I believe it's 2 teams every year. And when they go, they, with the backing of their Supreme Court, will have a bunch of judges, a bunch of prosecutors, and a whole jail. And they will do a plea deal camp where they clean out that whole jail in 1 week. Get everybody worked through the system, figure out what's going on, either set it for trial, plea it out, figure out what's going on. And since then, a lot of the sub-Saharan African countries have said, hey, that works for them. We want to be a part of that too. So do we need to know Ugandan law for that? No. We just have an idea. We know how plea deals work. So let's help them. We don't need to know their law for that, but we know how this can work and how to help, educate in that process. So there's all kinds of opportunities out there. You got to find them. But anyways, that's the November one, working with the Sudanese refugees primarily.
And then Norris, in your short tenure now as sort of the combination lawyer missionary, if you will, what do you think is a good, or who might be a good candidate for this if they're considering coming over to help work with this particular situation, but in general as well as you see Sprunger Global moving forward?
Sure. A good candidate is someone who values experience over expectation. I think that in the United States, you can pretty much expect your day to go exactly the way that day is going to go. And nothing really changes it. Maybe a couple of things happen here and there. I think in Egypt, experience is everything. And each day for 17 years, I've experienced something drastically different than I would have ever expected. And so someone who is capable of dealing with changing environments, someone who is interested in truly getting to know another culture, a culture that doesn't have the same value in the rule of law that we place in the same. A culture that views relationship as more prized than the law and the impartial practice of the law. This is someone who, the ideal candidate is someone who wants to come over here and really truly identify who an Egyptian is or what a displaced person is, and just get a better sense of a broader and bigger world around them, because that world is going to come to Main Street, Indiana. That world might already be there. It could get there in the next 5 years. It certainly will be there in the next 10 years. And we need to know how to serve our neighbors and love our neighbors, whoever those neighbors are, whether they are people that look like us and talk like us and were born in the same hospital as us, or they're people that literally escaped with the clothes on their back from intertribal warfare in Sudan or the Darfur region and come to Egypt. And then they went through a 10-year process of finally becoming a refugee and being resettled by the UN into the United States. And now they're trying to live their life out. We need to be good neighbors to them too. So someone who wants to be a good neighbor to anyone and everyone who's found in their towns or in their cities there in Indiana or around the country, that's a good candidate. Someone who's passionate about people, who loves people, who's not going to get bothered that the day started 2 hours late, but also went 7 hours late. And so it's about 3 a.m. by the time we're rolling back in to the hotel room, all because we had experiences to engage with. And who knows, if you say, one time I said yes in an Egyptian barbershop, and the next thing I knew, I was getting my nose waxed and my ears waxed, and I had a steam blower here and a eucalyptus towel, ethanol towel all over my face. And all I had said was yes to something that I had no idea what they said. So someone who's capable of just rolling with what could happen if we just say yes to the Spirit moving in our lives. What does that look like? And the transformation that comes from that is truly spectacular.
Very cool. Corey, as you look at where the initial idea sort of took root and the seed started to grow, how do you see the impact of Sprunger Global as we move forward? What would your hope and vision for that be?
Well, like any nonprofit, the obvious vision is that we do something that has a lasting impact wherever you go, right? But then getting back to that second purpose, I want to see lawyers and we take legal assistants too. Like, you don't have to be lawyers, just legal minded. Seeing these people come back to their hometowns with a change. And maybe it didn't completely change their life, but a seed maybe got planted or something changed. I've been on a lot of mission trips when I was in high school and college, and they were really impactful. And I may not even realize how impactful they were at the time, but they were impactful. So what's my vision? That lawyers who are movers and shakers by definition in their communities come back different people. Like, that's what I want to see. Obviously, I want to do good work where we're going, but I want to see lives changed.
That's cool. And then Norris, as the current executive director of that, what do you see as your role in sort of taking that vision, but also combining the passion that you've expressed here of being part of what's happening as a global lawyer, essentially?
Global law, international law is not just for the big firms. It's for us who grew up in northern Indiana or central Indiana or would rather be at a small town Friday night football game than some fancy restaurant somewhere. International law or engaging in the type of work that Sprunger Global does is not for the $1 million firm. It doesn't have to just be for them. It's for every one of us. And we have a responsibility to understand who our colleagues are across the globe. It's going to better us to create communities of best practice with people who are diversely minded and maybe has some cultural values that are different than ours. That's going to stretch us and grow us. We're going to become better and sharper at making our arguments, at drafting our memos or our appeals, all because we'll have a better understanding, not a complete understanding, that won't happen this side of heaven, but a better understanding of who other is and how we engage with that person. We'll engage with people who really don't like Americans. I have friends. I'm the only American they've ever met. But that's a really important thing because I need them to know that Americans aren't just what they saw in our news or in our television or in our music, that Americans love on others. So one of my efforts is to just kind of break down any of those walls that might exist between the international opportunity and the local lawyer. So let's break down those laws. Let's really get away from these traditional notions of what's possible. I believe both of you are estate planning attorneys. Okay, well, let's expand what those horizons are and think about cross-border trusts. Let's get excited about cross-border trusts. Who knows what that's going to look like? But there are a bunch of families over here who are American and Egyptian in a marriage of dual nationality who've got kids, and we've got to figure out how they inherit so that, Sharia law doesn't control and only their male son inherits, where they've got female children and they want their children to also inherit. Well, let's figure that out together. This is an opportunity to do so, and to do so with other like-minded folks who desperately want to serve people abroad. Tearing down those walls, whether they're real or they're imagined. And then because of Sprunger Global's really unique situation, we're both gifted and resourced enough, but also small enough to get into some places that bigger organizations just aren't going to go. There's not too many organizations that are actually engaging in the Middle East, North Africa right now. And yet you've got me over here living with my wife and 2 children. And I'm saying, yeah, sure, 150 miles away from here, not a great situation going on. But here we're perfectly safe and we can engage in really good work. And we can also sit down and have a coffee or a tea with people who are beside themselves with anger at what's going on in Gaza or in Palestine or in Israel. They're beside themselves. Okay, let's have a conversation, have a tea, have a coffee with them and see where the synergy is, where the overlap, where are the things that unite us. Do we have love for that person and do they have love for us? And if so, we've got a great opportunity to establish really some beginning foundations of conciliation. We've got, a peace, finding persons of peace and engaging with them. So just, tearing down the walls, getting into some places that we normally wouldn't be able to get into if we were larger, and generally thinking creatively about how can the law engage with protracted crises and challenges and conflicts abroad. And how do we take that small town or that midtown or that mid-tier lawyer and move them into a situation where their gifts and abilities can be used to glorify God in a very unique setting.
Awesome. Thomas, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. How about you sort of play the role as an interested attorney and maybe throw some questions out from a logistics standpoint and, kind of walk us through that process of what we might need to do if we want to take next steps.
I think you're muted there, Thomas.
There you go. I'm a lawyer, not an expert in technology. So my question, Corey, for you would be, like, if I'm looking at doing an initiative with Sprunger Global, how long is a mission trip? Kind of what do I need to prepare for? I know that I'm going to be prepared for some experience, not necessarily expectation, but kind of what is a timeline like as far as the mission trip is?
Well, I'll take that one, I guess. One of the things that we spent some time talking about is for an attorney to go and take time off of work, that is a burden all by itself, right? So they're spending their time on this rather than something else. And they're also foregoing the lost income they could have generated, right? So there's a big cost to somebody for going. So with that in mind, that means we need to keep these trips fairly short. We need to get in, we need to get out, and the scope of the commitment is that week. So we're not asking you to take on some case that's going to drag on for 2 years. We're asking for that week. You come, you're done. That's the commitment. So in that, we're looking for about a week is generally what we're trying. This one in November, we're going to do it over Thanksgiving, which for some people, that's okay. It's a holiday. That's a problem. But for, I think, more people, the answer is, all right, well, that's 2 less days of work I have to take off. So between the weekend before, the weekend at the end, 2 days of Thanksgiving and Friday after, we're really only 3 days off of work. And so that's sort of the commitment. We're also trying to fundraise to, as much as we can, offset the cost of these trips, because you're already asking the lawyer to not work. And so we're trying to keep those costs as low as we can. Whatever the cost is a donation, so it's deductible. for a 501c3 like this, but that's sort of the big picture of it. And then I maybe be better, Norris, if you want to expound a little bit. He's got a newsletter that he's starting. And so for a lot of people, I think the easiest step is just sign up for this newsletter, because then you'll know when trips are coming, see if anything interests of you or if there's any connections to be made.
Yeah, thanks. So all you really need to do is sign up at sprungerglobal.org. Sprunger is not Springer. It is Sprunger. Think about it as the past tense of Springer. It is sprungerglobal.org. And you can just go there, click around the website, find out who we are, what we do. There's some donation pages. There's some who we are, some pictures that you can see of previous trips to Kyrgyzstan. But then there's also this newsletter sign up. And that's the best way to keep in touch with us. We are also on LinkedIn, or you can connect with me at my Sprunger Global email at norris.ham. That's one M, not two, at sprungerglobal.org, norris.ham at sprungerglobal.org. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Again, we're small trips. We're not going into 5-star hotels. This is not something where you're having drinks. You're definitely not having drinks if you're coming here to the Middle East, which is super, super great. What you're coming here to do is to work and to serve. We've got a comfortable location where people are gonna lay their head at night, and we'll have some family style meals where we're all get together and share kind of some things that we engaged in over the course of that day. We're gonna have a Thanksgiving meal on this side of the Atlantic, which is kind of fun. We love to do that and to invite some Egyptian friends to that as well, just to share part of some of the beautiful parts of American culture. And then, of course, we'll do some sightseeing as bookending the trip. And that's kind of the trip. But like Corey said, fundraising is huge. You can get your firm to send one of its lawyers. I promise you, when that one lawyer comes back, they're going to be the greatest advocate for Sprunger Global and for the work that Sprunger Global is doing abroad. Firms can send one lawyer and people can get together and do that. They can use some of their professional development monies potentially as we build out some of these trip things where we've got some teachings and some learnings that go along with it. I do some pre-trip kind of information sessions along with some activities just to get a sense of what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be practicing this law. And then going back and reporting all these good things that have been done. And then they can, decide who's going to come next and how does the firm start engaging in this and just creating kind of a cyclical approach to this. Let's send lawyers to do good work, come and report it back. And then that goodwill can be expressed in the community. It can be expressed through clothes drives. It can be expressed through church groups. It can be, reported back to Sunday schools or shared, with a pastor. Great opportunities to get churches involved. Lawyers leading that effort and being kind of that tip of the sword or the tip of the spear, if you will, coming in. What a beautiful way for lawyers to actually take the lead in some faith-based opportunities. You don't have to be a believer to come on these trips. We are believers, and our faith in Jesus is kind of at the core of what Sprunger Global is. But you don't have to be a believer. We just want you to come and engage in good work using your skill sets abroad.
And how do you prepare attorneys for that trip, for the legal work that they're going to do? Corey mentioned he doesn't know anything about immigration law, but yet you guys are going to be doing immigration law. So if I'm signing up for a trip, I'm not an immigration attorney. How do you get me prepped so that I can hit the ground running the first day there, because you're only there for a short amount of time?
Sure. Well, I think, part of our pre-roll conversation was how'd you get started and what you're doing? And some of you just hung up a shingle. I know Corey hung up a shingle and said, I'm open for business, and whatever came his way, that's what he did. And he figured out how to do it. So part of it is we figure out how to do it. Other parts is, well, there are some really easy frameworks, but we build on the skills and the capacities that lawyers already have. Drafting a memo, it's no different. Interviewing a client, it's no different. We just need to know what questions should be asked, but we know how to approach that just because of the legal skills that we have. We still bring in the same ethical qualifications and the guided by those ethics. We still want to do no harm in that situation. We understand that this person has gone through huge upheaval in their lives and is fleeing from violence and oppression and persecution. Okay, so how do we become an advocate? Well, we are all advocates. We've advocated for clients. These are easy things for us to kind of latch onto, and just with some finishing touches and some kind of edging around it, what could look kind of messy actually takes shape really quickly, all just by, putting a little finishing touch on some of those skills that we use in our daily work as lawyers in the United States. We can do the same thing abroad, just tailoring them just a little bit to a maybe different clientele.
I appreciate you all being with us and shedding light on the work that you all are doing with Sprunger Global. It's some really neat stuff that you guys are doing. I kind of want to hand it over to you, Corey and Norris, to kind of give us some final comments about the work you all are doing, and then I'll turn it over to Seth.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about while we were talking is, there's been a lot of political change in our country, especially in our country's aid to other countries right now. And that can get real political real fast, which I'm not trying to go there. But the important thing I guess I am trying to say is, regardless of what role you think our government has in overseas aid, that is an entirely different analysis than what is a Christian's job? What is our duty as a private person? Totally different than what is the government's role. So I think all of us can have different disagreements and debate over what role should the government have, should the American government have in another country. But I think we can all agree that, especially now that the government is doing less overseas, what about us privately? What is the call on our life? People are people, no matter where they are. And the question to me is, do you want to do good with your life, and do you want to be changed? And if you want to have those experiences, that's where we're at. That's the heart of the issue. And, I hope that speaks to the people out there that may have opinions one way or the other about doing work overseas, because it's just is totally different. We're talking about private, faith-based work, not government tax-funded work. That's totally different.
Thank you for that. Norris, any final comments?
Yeah, I would second that. And even going further, we are not coming in to save Egypt or to save, in a traditional sense of, we're coming in with a far superior system and just transplanting it. It won't work. Civilizations for millennia have tried to bring in their culture into Egypt, and it has just not gone well. And what's amazing is that Egypt is still here, and it's millennia old. In America, we might make it to 250. We're excited about that. And in Egypt, we're sitting here roughly around 8,000 years, depending on. So this is not come and rescue. This is an opportunity to come and partner with some of those things that are still being upheld by the Lord in this country, partnering with some legal professionals and working with them in our skill sets to just sharpen things that they're already doing, or support, or just be of encouragement, a breath of fresh air, caring about them. So just as Corey was referencing that we've got this private ability to do this, this is not some government takeover effort. This is a private person saying, hey, there's an opportunity to share my skill set with others and to partner with the good work that's going on there. I'm in. Sign me up. And that's what gets me excited, is that, you can come over here. I walked by buildings today that are older than our nation. And I was just walking in Heliopolis, which is part of Greater Cairo. I'm just walking in Heliopolis, and yet some of those buildings are as old as our nation. And you just look around, and this people has eternity on their hearts. These people have seen things that, just is in their DNA. And we get to align ourselves with some of that and partner with that and improve and strengthen and encourage and share love with those people. And we don't know the eternal consequences of what our work will do in their lives. But if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what does. So anyway, that's my closing line, is come and just see what happens. And it'll be exciting nonetheless.
That's amazing, guys. Thanks so much for your time and the heart of what you're doing, the efforts that have gone into getting where you are. We wish, obviously, the best as you move forward. We're just happy to have had this conversation and share a little bit more with our audience what options are available. And I love the idea of just that engagement, making that personal decision to go out. A lot of our audience is someone who may be considering starting a law firm or is running a small law firm and now is trying to figure out, what does it mean to have that lifetime legacy? And we believe that that's a little bit bigger than just maybe having a successful, in the world's eyes, law practice. And so being able to take a practical expression of that from the skills and trainings that you have and having an outlet for that is just really incredible. So really appreciate your time today. Thomas, where can folks go to find more? We'll have lots of links and things in the description as well.
Yeah, the best place to go is to YouTube, Lifetime Legacy Lawyer Podcast on YouTube, and you can also find us anywhere that you get your podcasts. So check us out on Apple Podcasts, everywhere that you get your podcasts, and give us a listen, subscribe, like the episode, help get the word out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys, and we'll see everybody again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.